See, if your project is served by the hydrant system network, then we need to perform the hydraulic calculations for those hydrants as well. So now in this particular session, we are going to discuss about the concept of hydrant system, how many number of hydrants to be considered in the calculation, and how we need to perform the hydraulic calculations by entering the input data in the EliteFire software. See, basically we need to prepare a summary sheet for the hydrant system. In this we will mention number of hydrants considered for our hydraulic calculations. Either it can be 1 or maximum 2. So now we have the total demand requirement. We will mention the total demand requirement based on the results we got from the hydraulic calculations. So as per NFPA 24, we need to consider the hydrant network to perform our calculation. So coming back to the isometric, you can see we have considered the remotest fire hydrant. We consider in our calculation only one hydrant, but there is no issue if you want to consider 2 hydrants to perform the hydraulic calculation. So for example, if your building has n number of hydrants, maybe 1, 2, 10 or 15 or 20, we just need to consider 1 or 2 hydrants which are at the remotest area from the pump house. So basically, see, we have some hydrants here, but I did not consider any node numbers at this particular point. I just consider the remotest hydrant and I drawn the complete network. Here we can see the underground network and also the above ground network piping. So similarly, like we did for the sprinkler system and fire hose cabinets, we need to enter the node numbers and put the pipe sizing and length of the pipe and also the elevations for this particular isometric drawing. So now what we need to do, we need to enter all these details in the software. However, please note, as per NFPA 24, which is the standard to be considered for the hydrants and underground piping. So as per NFPA 24, minimum residual pressure required at the remotest hydrant shall be 20 psi. So we will tell the calculator or the software that I need 20 psi at the remotest hydrant. This is the most important point. And second thing, we will decide the fire flow requirement from this particular hydrant based on building code analysis. For example, based on building code analysis, if your building requires 1000 GPM, then I will consider 1000 GPM from this particular hydrant. So the outlet from this hydrant will be 1000 GPM. But if I consider 2 hydrants or 2 remotest hydrants, then the flow from this hydrant will be 500 GPM and the other hydrant will be 500 GPM. So basically, if your requirement is of 1000 GPM, if I consider one hydrant, I will consider the flow from this hydrant will be 1000, or in case we will consider 2 hydrants to perform our hydraulic calculations, then I will consider the flow from this particular hydrant as 500 GPM and from the other hydrant as 500 GPM. This one you need to keep in your mind before performing the hydraulic calculations. Since we consider only one hydrant and our building code analysis says the fire flow requirement will be 1000 GPM. So based on 1000 GPM, we consider one hydrant. So one hydrant will deliver 1000 GPM flow and we got the result as 40.71 PSI required at the inflow residual node. So if you see this particular isometric, if we have 40 PSI here, we can achieve 20 PSI requirement at the remotest hydrant. That 20 PSI also you can see on your screen here. We have run the calculation in demand mode. For the supply mode, I already explained you when we discussed about the sprinkler system. See here, I consider K factor as 223.61, which comes about 1000 GPM if we consider 223.61 K factor. Now we can enter design area of water application as 1 and 1. Since if we enter 0 here, the calculation software will not perform the calculation. So minimum, it says we need to put at least 1 square feet. Since there is no design area of operation in this particular hydrant network, we just put 1 in each calculation. And the default pipe material I mentioned as HDPE HDR 11 PN 16 rating. So based on the nodes available on the isometric, I have mentioned everything in the Allied Fire software. Since we already discussed about the software in our previous sessions, so I am just ignoring that particular point. Since you know how to enter the data in the software, you can see I mentioned all the nodes in the software, so it is showing here as pipe input data. I mentioned the pipe sizes and the fire pump proposed and the fittings and length of the pipe, everything I mentioned it here. So based on this, I got the result as, you can see here, since I mentioned I need 20 psi at the remotest hydrant, it is showing here, and 1000 GPM is our fire flow requirement. So I mentioned K factor as 223.6 or 7, whatever it is. So based on that, I got 1000 GPM flow. So our hose flow is 1000, our demand requirement will also be 1000. So based on 1000 GPM at 40.71 psi, it is satisfying our system demand requirement. Since we need only 20 psi for our hydrant, so already residual pressure required will be 40. So based on this graph is fine. So I consider 1000 GPM 100 psi pump for our requirement. Based on that, this would be fine. If you have any particular query related to this particular concept, or if you have any queries related to the related to understanding this particular calculation, just let me know on my email ID Irfan mechengr@gmail.com. I'm happy to help you. Anytime you can contact me on my YouTube channel as well. Thank you so much. Bye.